This is Module 2, Topic B review video. So we're going to start with our first four problems, which have to do with order of operations. And we're going to remember that we need B PEMDAS. For those people who might forget what everything stands for, B is for brackets, P was for parentheses, E was for exponents, M and D were for multiplication and division, the A and the S are for addition and subtraction. And it says, burp, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So now we're going to start here, and the first thing I notice is there are no brackets. So I look at my parentheses first. So there's a 9 minus 3, which is 6, and I rewrite everything else. And now I have 7 times 6, and 7 times 6 is 42. Remember, there's no equal sign. We just simplify, we do not write an equal sign. Next, we have two sets of parentheses. So we start with the parentheses on the left for question number 2. 5 times 4 is 20. We rewrite everything else. We notice there's another set of parentheses. And then we end up with our final answer. Number 3, there are brackets in this one. So we're going to start with our brackets, and inside our brackets, we're going to follow our order of operations. And inside the brackets, we do have parentheses, so we're going to start with that. And we're going to rewrite everything else. We still have brackets, so we need to continue on with our brackets. So we're going to do 48 divided by 8, which is 6. And we're going to add that to 3 to the second power. When we see that we have 3 to the second power, since we have exponents, we have to do that before we add. 3 to the second power means 3 times 3. It does not mean 3 times 2. 3 to the second power is just like saying 3 2 times. So 3 times 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 is 9, and we rewrite what's after that, and 6 plus 9 is 15. I'm going to erase that just to make some more room. Now we're going to work on over here, and over here there is a mistake in here. If we solve it as is, then we will have a negative number. So what we're going to do is we're going to put parentheses in there. So we have to solve the parentheses first because there are no brackets. Since we're solving the parentheses, we do 103 minus 3, which is 100. And then we have times 90 minus 3 plus 6. We rewrite everything else. Now we're going to look at this. And the first thing we see is that there's still more parentheses, so we're going to solve those. And we're going to rewrite everything else. And now we're down to multiplication and subtraction. And we see that multiplication happens first. We can use our 0 rule. So we have a 9, and we have to put 3 zeros back in. And we're going to subtract out the 9. Next, we're going to do 9,000 minus 9. Some people might need to do this to make it easier for them to subtract. So you can do that if it will help you. And then our answer would be 8,991. And we would circle our answer. Those are the first four for order of operations. Now we're going to take words that we have and we're going to write them into numerical expressions. So it says the difference between 992s and 863s. So the difference tells me to subtract, so I know I have to do that. Then I'm talking about 992s. So that would be 9 times 92, because that's what I want. And then I want 863s, so I'm multiplying. And I put these in parentheses in order to make sure I do all my multiplication, and then I subtract my answers. It just asks you to write the expression. It doesn't ask you to solve, so I don't need to. Next is 7 times the sum. So I have to find the sum of these two numbers first before I do 7. So to find the sum, it tells me to add, and I want to do 7 times that sum. Now we're going to compare. When we look at these two numbers and we want to compare, we're going to be comparing 61 times 34 to 38 times 46. And I can see without even solving this, I can solve them if I want to in order to compare them. But the first thing I should notice is that this number is way larger than this number, and this number is only a little smaller than this number, telling me that since this one has that really large number in there, it's telling me that I'm going to be larger over here. If I wanted to prove it to myself, I can go to the side and do the multiplication. And then I can go over here and do the multiplication. And when I multiply these out, I can see that I was correct in thinking that the number on the left is larger than the number on the right. Next question is to complete the area model and then solve. So I have to do both the area model and the standard algorithm. So I'm going to set it up. And we know that the first number goes on the top. Since there's two numbers here, we know that I split it into two boxes. This one is 3, this one is 20. I'm going to multiply 3 times 62, and I end up with 186. And then I'm going to ignore the 0, put it back in over here, and 62 times 2 would be 1,240. And then I'm going to add them together, and I end up with 1,426. Now I'm going to move over to this side, and I'm going to solve. And I notice that this matches over here, so that's a good sign. Next row, I solve that. Oh, these two match as well. That tells me that I'm headed in the right direction. And when I add them together, since they match up, that's a good sign that I'm doing it correctly. Next, once again, I'm going to do my area model of 134. I have 1 and I have 20. 134 times 1 is nice and easy. And I ignore my 0. I put my 0 back in. And 134 times 2 is 268. And now I add them up. And now I move over here and I do my multiplication. First row matches. Second row matches. And my two answers match. I'm now going to move on to question 4. Same thing, they want me to use the area model. I'm going to do it in the reverse order to show you that you can put the larger number on top. It still works the same. Or actually, I apologize. It won't work the same when you try to match up your rows. It will work the same if you're just trying to solve. Four times 87. Ignore my 0, put my 0 back in. 87 times 2. And when I add them up, I get 2,088. So now I come over to here to see if this will work. My first row matches. My second row matches. And my answers match. And I should put my answer up on my answer line. So now we're going to use our area model again. $387 times 4. If you're someone who has a tough time doing that in your head, you can go over to the side and do this. And then once I get my answer, I can put it in. And I ignore my 0, so I have to put it back in. So 387 times 2. And now I'm going to add them up. And when I add them up, I get 9,188. Now I'm going to go over and do my standard algorithm. I'm going to look and say to myself, well, I did something wrong somewhere because my two numbers don't match up. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to start by looking at 387 times 4 over here that I did, and I'm going to see if I did anything wrong. So 4 times 7 was 28, and then 4 times 8 was 32, plus 2 was 34, and then 4 times 3 was 12, plus 3. This should have been 15. So because of it, I was able to catch my mistake, which also means that I need to go back here and I need to re-add. So now I'm going to continue back in my standard algorithm and see what I can do here. Those two numbers match, that's a good sign. And now my two answers match. So it's a good idea to go back and forth between everything that you're doing, and it will help you to catch your own mistakes. So we are still working with our area model and our standard algorithm. This time we're going with our 3 digits. So since there's 3 digits in the second number, I'm going to need 3 rows. I still start with my first number up on the top. The 0 rule still works. And 2 more zeros. Some of you might need to do this on the side. And I'm going to put my numbers back in. I'm going to make sure that I realize that 1 is there, so I'm going to rebox that. So now I can add them. Here's my answer. So I'm going to go over and do my standard algorithm. My first row matches. Start with a 0. My second row matches, which is another good sign. This time I have to put 2 zeros in because we're all the way over in the hundreds place. This also matches, so now I'm going to add it all up. And when I add it up, they match, which means I am most likely correct. So now we're at letter D. 3 digits again. This is 246. First place is 2. Next is 0. And the last one is 700. This 0, I don't need it, so I really only need 2 rows. If you want to use it, you can if it will help you. So I do 246 times 2. I don't worry about the 0. I put in my 2 zeros. I do 246 times 7 on the side. And I fill it in. And now I add it up. And I get 172,692. And I go and I do my standard algorithm on the side. Just like I just said before, there's a 0 there, so everything's going to be a 0. I don't have to do this row. If I want to, I can put the 3 zeros in that I need and go to my next row, or I could have skipped that altogether. And my rows match, so now I'm going to add them all up because they match. And I have the same answer. Next, I'm going to estimate the product first and then solve by using the standard algorithm and check if my answers make sense. So I'm going to start by estimating. This rounds to 400. This rounds to 600. And when I estimate that all out, I get 24 and the 4 zeros back in. Now I'm going to solve my actual. I'm going to add them all up. And my actual is this. And 234,548 is reasonable near 240,000. Going to try the next one. I'm going to round this. And then I'm going to round this one. And when I ignore the zeros, I get 12, and then I put my 5 zeros back in. Next, this should say 3,802 times 406. There's a typo in there. So I'm going to solve that. We said before we don't need to do that 0, so we can start in the 4. So we're going to put 2 zeros in. These two answers are close to each other, so they are reasonable. Next, we have a word problem. It says Jawad picked 40 bags of apples on Monday and sold them at his fruit stand for $5.43. So he has 40 bags, and he sold them for $5.43 each. The following week, he picked and sold 7 bags more. How much money did Jawad earn in the first week? So he had 40 bags, and he sold them at his fruit stand. They each were $5.43. So I'm going to multiply. It is a lot easier to ignore the 0. We've talked about that. And just do $5.43 times 4. So we're going to take this over here. And we're going to put this down and put our 0 back in. And we have to remember that we jumped 2 spots, so we have to jump 2 spots. And he was at $217.20. Part B says how much money did he earn in the second week. So it says the following week he picked and sold 7 bags more. So if we just take our 543 and multiply it by 7, and we take 2 jumps. My answer, though, is not 3801. He did that in addition to what he already sold. So this is before the 7 bags. This is with the 7 bags. So this is for week 2. And now they want to know how much he sold altogether. So this was week 1, and this was week 2. And when I add them all together, that's what I get for my total. And that is our topic B review for Module 2.